Okay, so a couple minutes after 4, so we will get started. So firstly, I want to introduce myself for those of you who don't know. My name is Erin Kemp with Kemp Travel, and I just want to thank you guys for taking the time out of this beautiful, what seems like a spring day today to come and listen to ourselves and Gary from G Adventures about our upcoming Peru tour. So again, thank you very much for coming, and we really are excited about our Peru tour. It's honestly one of my favorite places. I've been a few times and I would gladly go back again, especially now. I mean, I think everyone's kind of dying to get away. So I will hand it over to Gary, and he will go through the safety procedures and protocols that G has put in place, especially what they have done in Peru and the itinerary that we have put together for our hosted Peru tour. We also have Eric Forrest, who is here with us, and he will be your escort on that tour. He did get a chance to go to Peru a couple of years ago, so he is very familiar with the itinerary and what it's like to travel around Peru. So you would be in great hands. Eric, do you have anything to say before we hand it over to Gary?
Nope, I just wanted to welcome everyone as well that's here from Lakeshore Tours or Cardinal Coach Tours as well. So Gary's the expert on this, so I'll let him take it away and not take up any more of your time.
Cool. Awesome. Yay. I get to talk about Peru. Fantastic. So thank all of you, or I want to thank all of you for joining me today to learn a little bit more about G Adventures, about our operations in Peru and the health and safety protocols that we're putting in place on all of our tours, as well as, of course, on our future departures to Peru as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see the presentation. There we go. Cool. Can everybody see the deck? The welcome. Yes, I see thumbs up. Fantastic. Great. So housekeeping rules, I guess at the start, you are mostly muted. I am going to pause a little bit and answer any questions you might have. And then also at the end, there's going to be time for questions as well, because Peru tends to generate a lot of questions, for people who haven't been, and particularly, in the current climate as well. What does it look like to travel through the region with us? And so there is a chat box as well. So if you want to put some questions in the chat box as well, we can get to those at the end too. So hi, everybody. My name's Gary. I am the G Adventures Global Purpose Specialist for Eastern Canada. So my role at G Adventures is to help our agency partners find more passion, purpose, and happiness in their roles. So it's my job to make travel agents' jobs easier if possible. And it means I get the chance to do great events like this, and also just make sure that when you're going in and talking to your local travel agent, that they know everything and anything about G Adventures and have the support of us when helping to answer your questions as well. So a little bit of an agenda for today. I'm absolutely going to introduce the safety protocols and measures that G Adventures is putting in place. We'll talk a little bit about the why G Adventures, and really why travel, and then also the how. So what does it look like to be on a G Adventures group? And then, of course, the where. We're going to talk about Peru and travel through that region, and of course, have time for some questions at the end of this presentation as well. So it is the elephant in the room, the idea of talking about travel in the middle of a global pandemic. And ultimately, we want to make sure that our travelers know and the general public know that you are able to travel with confidence with G Adventures, that we are putting in place many different procedures and protocols and practices to ensure that we are effectively managing and mitigating the risk of transmission of COVID-19 when traveling around the world. There's a lot that we're doing. It's holistic. It's not just on trip, it's pre-trip, when you arrive, while you're on your tour, and then also before you leave as well. And so before you join us, we absolutely highly recommend that every traveler get tested for COVID-19, to take that PCR test prior to travel, even if the destination does not require you to do so, just because it puts everybody in the best possible position when you arrive. And then we do have a health questionnaire that we ask that our travelers fill out before they arrive. When you're on your trip, your CEO will be helping to kind of set expectations around protocols. There's things that we're doing on the tour, things that you will already be doing in your day-to-day lives here in Canada. And then, of course, helping you to get PCR tests in destination so that you're able to enter back into Canada at the other side of the trip, and make sure that we're meeting border and entry requirements for coming back home as well. So we do operate small groups at G Adventures. There are a ton of benefits to this, have always been a ton of benefits, but particularly it means that we're not having to reinvent the way that we operate in order to meet the requirements and demands of COVID-19. So there's a lot of benefits to traveling with a smaller group. One of them is just intrinsically less risk because there's fewer people on that trip. And then also our CEOs have always been really important in talking to our travelers and making sure that they understand the differences, the cultural differences and unique aspects of being in a different destination. And what we're doing now is just layering on those conversations around what local protocols look like, what health and safety looks like, kind of setting expectations for the trip itself. And because you are a small group, it just becomes very habitual very fast. I mean, we've been running itineraries on a very limited basis since September. And the feedback that we've had is that the experiences are the same, that you're able to travel to these destinations and it's still culturally immersive, and there's certain logistical challenges. You're only allowed to go into certain places for a certain amount of time. So there's more structure, but ultimately the experience is still fantastic. And you have that chance to have that kind of in-group behavior, right? When you're getting on the bus, you're getting off the bus, we're wearing masks, we're hand sanitizing, we're keeping physically and socially distanced. And the CEO is there to make sure that everybody is cognizant and abiding by those protocols so that we can all travel safely. Ultimately, it's not just about the health and safety of our travelers, it's also about the health and safety of the people in that destination. We are very lucky in Canada that we have extremely robust and widely available healthcare, whereas in many rural and remote parts of the world where we operate, and including the Sacred Valley of Peru, healthcare facilities are not to the same standard. And so we really need to be doing our part, not just to protect our travelers, to protect the local populations and the places that we visit as well. We are, in many cases, being able to ensure that those travelers who are looking for my own room, if you are traveling solo, have the option to book your own rooms as well. Historically, it's always been the case that if you don't want to have your own room, we don't force you to have one. You can be in a room with a like-minded traveler of the same gender, but increasingly we are seeing more travelers looking to have that extra space, and that's it is on all of our itineraries, including those in Peru. As I mentioned, our CEOs are the crux of this. So they are there to make sure that every traveler has the best experience possible and feels safe and comfortable while on a journey. And so that question of, is it safe to travel to insert destination here? As an adventure travel company, we've always been able to answer that question, and we've always put safety first. This is just a continuation of that, and there's nobody better placed than our local CEOs to ensure that that we're putting in place these protocols and are working with suppliers in destination to make sure that they understand the importance of these measures, why they're being put in place, and following those guidelines as well. But ultimately, like I said, we're not having to reinvent the wheel. We do use smaller accommodations, locally owned and operated places. It's I don't know many hotels where you have to take the elevator to the 20th floor of a G Adventures hotel. It's just not something traditionally that we have to do. And so more often than not, and including in Peru, like you're walking around or you're going up a couple flights of stairs to get to your room. And it just means that those, because it's a smaller property, those usually more heavily trafficked areas like the restaurants, like the lobbies are just not as busy because it's just not as big a place. And then, not overprescribing the number of meals that we have on our trips. It is important that you eat and eat safely while on tour. It's the reason why many of us travel, is to try and enjoy the local cuisine. And so that chance for the CEO to book a room ahead in a restaurant, a private space, or to find space on the patio outside, or to talk about the options for alfresco dining or street food in the region that you're in. It's always been our goal to ensure that we're working with local suppliers and that more of the money that you spend in destination is supporting that local business. So the same way that we're able to support our restaurants here at home, we're also going to make sure that we're safely able to support restaurants in destination as well. So I wanted to put this in as well. G Adventures, we've been operating in Peru for a long time. We are the largest operator on the Inca Trail historically. We were recognized by the Ministry of Tourism in Cusco as the best operator on the Inca Trail. And so when the Peruvian government was looking to work with a partner to find out what this looks like for hiking operations in Peru, this picture was taken about 2 weeks ago, where the government, allowed us to show them what it looks like to safely operate on the Inca Trail. So we presented all of the protocols that we're putting in place, and then had the members of the government come and see and learn and watch as our porters, cooks, and guides ran a dummy run of an Inca Trail trip, to let them know that absolutely, we're able to operate when they feel safe to do so, when community transmission has been reduced, and when they feel like it's time to ease the entry requirements into Peru. We can show them as a supplier, a trusted supplier, that we can operate these trips safely, and it's you're going to be able to mitigate the risk and also ensure that the local people can benefit from the economic, the economic needs of travel and tourism. Because again, we're very lucky in Canada. We have government support for those people who have really borne the brunt of the economic impacts of this pandemic. In other nations and in other places, there is a limited amount of support available to them from the government. And so they are very eager to have travel and tourism restart. And it's important that we're engaging in that dialogue to say, yes, absolutely, we want that too. But we also want to make sure that we restart in a safe way. And so we're very much engaged with those conversations with the government. So that's a bit of an introduction to the health and safety protocols, everything that we are doing at G to make sure that we are able to operate and continue to operate and grow our operations in a way that makes sure that we're mitigating the risk of transmission of COVID-19. And so I'd like to speak to the why as well. I mean, for us, I've touched on it briefly, but this idea of the importance of travel and tourism, some of the intangible stuff, as well as the economic stuff when it comes to travel. Ultimately at G Adventures, we were founded by this guy, his name's Bruce. He grew up in Calgary. He founded this company in 1990 in Toronto, and he founded it on this ideal that travel and tourism can be a force for good, that the travel industry has, this ability, it has this real promise of being a fantastic mechanism for wealth redistribution, that the industry itself takes some of the wealthiest people in the wealthiest countries in the world to visit the poorest people in the poorest countries in the world. So why can't more of the money that people spend on travel, why can't the economic benefits of that stay in local destinations and lead to positive outcomes for the people in those places? Ultimately, this, maybe romantic and small goal of saying that travel and travelers will save the world, that travel can be a form of, philanthropy, that simply going on vacation, you are having that positive impact and helping to support economic development as well as social and environmental protection in the destination, simply by going and taking that trip of a lifetime that you've always dreamed of. And there's a lot of ways that we do this at G Adventures. It's something that's easy to say, and with practice and diligence over 30 years of operation, it is becoming easier for us to do. And it's all part of G for Good. So we know that you as travelers, you want to go and have a fantastic time, and that is the most important thing. So G for Good is all the stuff that G Adventures does in the background to make sure that we're a responsible operator, and simply by going, you are having that positive impact. So there's the Ripple score, a metric on the vast majority of our trips that shows the economic sustainability of that trip. That's a score out of 100 that shows, what percentage of the money that you spend for in-trip costs is staying in that destination. And it's not G Adventures counting our own beans. We got a third-party organization to audit our entire supply chain and generate those numbers so that we can be transparent with our travelers and show you that we're putting our money where our mouth is, and this isn't just sounding good. It's the way that we're structured as a business to make sure that we prevent leakage and ensure that the money you spend with us stays and helps support people in that destination. We have our responsible travel policies as well, so including animal welfare policies, whereby we ensure that there are no unintended negative consequences of our travelers visiting a destination, that there's no tiger temples or elephant rides or dolphin experiences on any G Adventures trip, that there's no way of interacting with wildlife that can any way negatively impact those animals. This is also key in Peru for us with the herders that we use for the Lares trek and other trekking operations to make sure that those animals are being treated fairly while they're being used as beast of burden on our trips. Obviously, on the Inca Trail, you are not allowed to have pack animals in the national park. And so, yeah, it's not as much a concern on those trips, but for our other hiking itineraries. We do have policies in regard to working responsibility with indigenous communities, rural and remote communities around the world. Previous to the pandemic, there was a lot of media concentration on the idea of over-tourism. And for us, over-tourism doesn't just mean, Venice and Rome and Barcelona and Amsterdam. The idea is that, 30, 40, 50 travelers a day going to a community made up of 30 or 40 or 50 people can start to have an impact on their culture and way of life. And so we make sure at G Adventures that we are engaged in conversation with these groups, with these peoples, with these cultures and communities, so that they can tell their stories in their way. And it is a cultural exchange where our travelers are getting unique experiences and learning about the people in the place. But those people in that community are also able to tell their story how they want, and making sure that we're not having any of those unforeseen negative consequences. And then finally, our child welfare policy to ensure, again, that we're mitigating any risk for youth, particularly at-risk youth in rural and remote communities. So no orphanage visits, no school visits on any G Adventures trip. This is all part of, and driven by Planetara, our sister company, the non-for-profit part of G Adventures. The Planetara Foundation turns travel into impact. I highly recommend going to planetara.org if you want more information on the 100+ projects that we have all over the world that have been supported by Planetara, either through microloans and seed funding to get businesses started, or through simply expertise and planning and resources to allow people, businesses, nonprofits within a destination to start their own companies and tap into the tourist economy. So ultimately, G Adventures has become the world's largest small group provider of travel. And I believe that it is because of, and not despite of, these principles of doing the right thing and doing the profitable thing. These aren't mutually exclusive. They can work together. You can have a for-profit company partnered with a nonprofit that works in partnership with local people on the ground to ensure that everybody benefits from travel and tourism. And that's why, we are continued to be extremely excited about travel, to ensure that people focus on some of the positives. It's the positive benefits for us as an individual to go on a trip, to learn about a unique and different culture. It helps to break down the barriers that for some reason societies build up against each other, to go and see and learn and do and build empathy with people around the world, and is important, and it's beneficial for everybody involved. And so for us, committing to travel, when you feel safe to do so is important. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to work with partners on the ground to ensure that we can get back to traveling, so that these positive benefits can be reignited around the world. And that's kind of why we are so excited still about speaking to the benefits of travel and tourism. So that's a little introduction to, I've talked about safety, the importance of safety, what we're working on, as well as the why behind G Adventures. Before I kind of talk about Peru itself and kind of lead us through this itinerary in one of my favorite parts of the world, are there any questions about anything that I've covered so far? And of course, we'll have time for questions at the end. But just if there's anything in any of those points that you want to raise now, please, you can unmute yourself, and I'm right here to answer them. Okay, if there aren't any questions, or if there's no questions, then I will continue and we'll keep them for the end. So Peru is my favorite topic of conversation. For many people, this view is the reason why they consider a trip to this country. And Machu Picchu is one of the 7 wonders of the world for a very good reason. It is a spectacular example of the ingenuity and creativity and ability for human beings to sculpt something that is, out of this world. And so absolutely, for many people, visiting Machu Picchu, learning about the Inca and the societies that they stood on when it came down to building these citadels is a spellbinding travel, a trip through history as well as through geography. But there are many different reasons to travel to Peru and many different highlights as you go through. Not least arriving in Lima, a city of 10 million people almost, and having the chance to spend some time exploring everything that city has to offer. It is a culinary hub. You do have the chance to surf if you want, if you arrive a little early or spend a couple of days after. There are some great waves off the coast of Peru, which I did not know until I got there. There's beautiful walking tours available and the opportunity to explore Miraflores. The picture in the bottom there is the Parc de l'Amour. And the idea is that, lovers will walk along the Malecon by the ocean and then embrace in the park. And so, we were all standing around the statue relatively awkwardly. And then, of course, when I got home, I saw that there were people following those guidelines in the background of that picture as well. There's beautiful cathedrals. There's the history of Huaca Bacalan. I really struggle to pronounce the name of the Incan site in the center of Miraflores in Lima. It's basically that a mud pyramid was how it was described to me, and one of the earliest habitations and civilizations on the coast of Latin America, and a thoroughly fascinating way to spend an afternoon while you're in Lima as well. So the trip really does start in Lima. There is a lot to be excited for from the moment that you arrive. And we do recommend arriving a day in advance just to make sure that you get that chance to settle in before continuing to Cusco, to fly to the Sacred Valley, to arrive at altitude, and to have some time to explore what was the navel of the Incan world. It's with this itinerary that Camp Travel put together, you get to spend some extra time in Cusco. And I always recommend, if you're in Cusco, it is a place that you will want to spend extra time. The architecture is stunning. You've got these 15th century cathedrals built on top of the foundations of the Incan temples. So these huge brick boulders on the bottom, and then you have these beautiful cathedrals on top. There's so much to do in and around Cusco. I always tend to travel down to the San Pedro Market. This is a place where you can pick up some essential supplies if you're doing some hiking, but also if you are suffering from the impacts of and the symptoms of altitude sickness. This is where you can get coca leaves, by the bag, and that will help you with mitigating some of those negative symptoms of being in altitude. The key is slow and steady. When you're in Peru, you are at over 3,000 meters for the vast majority of the time. I get many questions on altitude sickness. Ultimately, everybody is impacted differently. My body hates me when I'm at altitude, and it just feels like a bad hangover. You've got a headache, you need to keep hydrated, you're tired. And so what coca leaves do is provide just some relief from those symptoms. It's basically like it's almost like a cup of coffee, but without the negative qualities of coffee. And so the San Pedro Market is a place, if you want to find out how the locals deal with living at altitude, then this is the place that you can get your hands, not just on coca leaves, but also coca tea, which is just, those leaves in water that you can drink through the day to help reduce the symptoms. Of course, there is fantastic medication. Speak to your travel doctor prior to going to Peru to talk about altitude sickness pills, because they will be able to provide the best information on that as an alternative as well. So you'll have some time in Cusco, and then we get on a vehicle and transfer you a beautiful drive, into the Sacred Valley, up and over the pass and down into the Urubamba River Valley. Absolutely stunning scenery throughout that drive. And then you arrive at the Women's Weaving Co-op. You may notice some of the things that I have around me here, and of course my scarf. It's an amazing opportunity to learn from the descendants of the Inca about the process of creating these unique textiles. So, you learn about, this is where the wool is from, right? They have the alpacas and the llamas there. And then, this is how we wash the wool. This is how we dye the wool. This is how we weave the wool into these durable, long lasting and, useful garments. And a little bit about the history of that. as well as the process, simply by going and visiting this community, and you are helping to support the women in that place, to provide economic opportunities for them, to allow the transfer of those historic patterns and the preservation of that culture. Even if you don't purchase any goods while you are there, you are helping to support the people in this place. And it is one of those projects where you can really see the tangible benefits of travel and tourism impacting a community. Even from the 4 years, 5 years between the first time I visited the Women's Weaving Co-op and to when I was there in 2019, you know, those women who've been working there since the start, all of their children are now studying in university, a dramatic shift from the generation prior. And so it's one of those places where it is a win-win-win. We get to learn about this culture and history, and we're also making sure that we're providing more opportunities for the people in that place. From there, we take you to one of the best meals you'll have in Peru, which is really difficult to do because it is renowned, world-renowned now, particularly in Lima, for the culinary arts in Peru. And so in the Poa restaurant, again, a Planetara supported project where you know, local people are, it's a training kitchen where they have the opportunity to learn to prepare some of the amazing foods in the region. You'll learn about the 3,000 plus varieties of potato. You'll have quinoa. You'll have the chance, if you want, to try some guinea pig and just learn about, you know, farm to table experiences and help support that local community simply by having one of the most delicious meals you'll ever have. I've had the good fortune to eat in Paua on a couple of occasions. And yeah, if I could order takeout from there, I mean, yeah, that would be amazing. I guess the airline industries probably wouldn't be happy with, it'd be quite a cost to charter a plane to get me my Peruvian food, but it would be worth it. It's a beautiful site, the chance to explore the grounds. There's a little farm right on the doorstep. And then also all of the foods that are prepared there are all sourced from the local farms in that part of the Sacred Valley. So again, it's one of those projects that really gives back to the community and is self-sustaining. From there, you travel to Ollantaytambo and have the chance to learn more about the Incan architecture of old. You can see the terraces there in the landscape. And then at the top of that, you have the Temple of the Moon and the Temple of the Sun and the various religious and sacred areas. Ollantaytambo is a living city, so the modern town is built on top of the ancient Incan and pre-Incan civilization. You know, when you're there and you're walking up those steps, we have a little break. You can look back at the town and the storehouses. Sorry, technical difficulties, and the storehouses on the other side, where you know, the peoples of this place had stored their grain and such for, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of years. You know, a natural form of refrigeration. But when you're actually, you know, from when you're at the storehouses, you can see out and even see the quarries on the other side of this range where all the stone was mined to then be dragged over the Urubamba River to build the terraces and the historic sites of Ollantaytambo. So it's an action-packed trip. You are able to then take the train from Ollantaytambo up to Aguas Calientes. You don't have to hike when you're in Peru. There is a perfectly good train that will take you there. And when you take the train, it means we can build in a little bit more time at some of these other places to learn more and explore more the Sacred Valley versus hiking the various trails in the region. So Aguas Calientes is at the base of Machu Picchu Mountain. This is your last stop before visiting the most famous Incan citadel. A beautiful little town, large markets there as well. The name of the town, the clue is in the title, Aguas Calientes. There are hot springs there as well, so the chance to soak and relax. There's a butterfly sanctuary just down the road from the hotels that we use as well. And there's a little kind of secret waterfall that your CEO may be able to show you as well if you have the desire to go for a little hike prior to, you know, a little walk really prior to visiting Machu Picchu. There is the option to do the one-day hike as well. So for those doing the one-day hike, you'll board the train with everybody else in Ollantaytambo. You'll get off at kilometer 103 and then hike up, you know, for a half day. Well, really, it's a full day hike up, you know, through the mountains, visiting one of the most famous Incan sites on the way into Machu Picchu in Awea, having a picnic lunch as you go as well, and then having a chance to enter Machu Picchu the day prior to the rest of the group to kind of have a chance to explore that site with your local guide after hiking in. So you'll come up past Winawea and then through the Sun Gate and down into Machu Picchu itself with a full day to explore. For those who prefer, of course, you can just get on the train and arrive in Aguas Calientes, and there are those hot springs waiting for you when you arrive as well. There is no bad way of seeing the area. It really just depends on what you want and what your preferences are and the experiences that you want to have while you're in that destination. Finally, you know, we transfer you back to Cusco. You have that free day on this itinerary, which is amazing. There is a lot to see and do in Cusco. You can walk up to Woman, the fortification just outside of Cusco, which is where one of the last stands of the Incan kings against the Spanish conquistadors took place. These giant monolithic stones that were the source of that protection, where they really gave the conquistadors, it was a close run thing for their conquest on that day. There's textile factories in town. You can go and learn about silver manufacturing in the area. You can simply, you know, walk the cobblestone streets and sit in the wide open spaces and enjoy your time in this city. There's so much to see and do, and also choosing to do less is sometimes gives you that little bit more as well. There's horse riding activities, there's whitewater rafting, there's a lot that we can do. Rainbow Mountain, there's other add-ons we can put in there. So a free day is always a great day when you're in Cusco. And then again, as part of the itinerary that the team have put together for you, Aaron and Eric, the chance to go to Lake Titicaca, to fly down to Puno, to learn about the Uros people and you know, visit the highest elevation lake that has a full-time population. A really interesting history, you know, the reasons why the people in this region built reed islands out into the lake to defend themselves against you know, other civilizations, and have continued to live on Lake Titicaca since. The chance to stay in a local homestay, to visit the region, and again, just to learn about a unique history and culture in a beautiful part of the world, and to continue to explore all that Peru has to offer. Of course, you know, I've covered quite a lot of information in a relatively short period of time. Your best guide for more information on each part of this itinerary are going to be Aaron and Eric and their team. They've been to Peru and have seen this for themselves, and I can tell have that same passion that you know that I show for the region as well. And so for all those questions, for all the help and support, to be able to build a little bit of a customized itinerary for everybody on this trip, there's a million reasons to work with a local travel professional. I've talked a lot about supporting local business through this talk, and that can start from home, right? The ability to support a local travel agency, to book with your local travel professional, and it costs the same to book with an agent as it does to book direct with G. You know, I tend to joke, you know, I don't cut my own hair, I don't do my own taxes. I mean, I really don't cut my own hair. It's obvious now with the lockdowns. You know, there's certain things, I don't book my own travel, right? There is a professional who's going to be able to make that a far smoother process. And so it makes a lot of sense to work with them, not just to support local business, to provide an excellent experience and a seamless and stress-free experience for you, and to have that additional source of support and advocacy when it comes to booking your dream vacation and getting the most out of your holiday. And so I really want to thank them for allowing me the opportunity to speak to all of you. I really want to thank all of you for taking the time on this beautiful, hopefully spring evening to learn more about the why behind G Adventures, about our safety protocols, about our commitments to the people in the Sacred Valley of Peru, and about the wonders that await you there if you do choose to travel with Kemp Travel and G Adventures in 2021 or beyond. Because yeah, it's a really beautiful part of the world to visit, and you know, is a place that many people want to visit, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So that's the presentation in a nutshell. Again, thank you all so much for giving me your time. And if there are any questions, and I hope there are, then I look forward to answering them now as well.
Thank you very much, Gary. We really appreciate you going through all of that. And like Gary said, we're going to open it up to questions now. So if you want to put those questions into the chat feature, or unmute your line to ask those questions, by all means, please go ahead and do so.
Yeah, I'll also just jump in for a second too. Of course, we just kind of walked through some of the highlights of our tour. Some of the stuff Gary mentioned that you can do is optional. I know it seems like there may be a lot of hiking. If you're joining us on our tour, we've made it accessible to everyone. So you don't have to hike anywhere if you don't want to. There is walking around in the city, but if you want to hike the Inca Trail, you can. If you want to take the train, you can still get to the same places without the hiking. Just from being there myself, I mean, the pictures don't do it justice. I was a little iffy when I first went, and to be honest, it's become probably one of my favorite places I've ever visited. I mean, there's just something special about it. And then again, I just want to touch on the altitude sickness. We went with a group of 26 2 years ago, and to be honest, nobody had any real issues. But again, it's just something important to note. So we're not trying to scare anyone. It's just something to think about. So if anybody has questions about the specific itinerary, that was just a brief overview, but we want to get into some of the finer details. So please send your questions if you have them.
What is the typical duration of one of these excursions?
Yeah, so this itinerary I think is 14 days, because we've added
12 days. It's a 12-day itinerary
days.
for this one. There are, of course, other options. However, our hosted tour is a 12-day tour.
Yes. And I mean, that's the thing with Peru, we have, I mean, yeah, over 30 different itineraries through the region. And so we have shorter duration trips where you're simply, flying into Cusco, spending 5 days in the Sacred Valley, and it's a total 7-day trip, Lima to Lima. I really like this itinerary, and I tend to suggest, I've always suggested more is more in Peru. If you have the time and are able to visit, on this itinerary, that the hosted tour, Puno and Lake Titicaca, it is definitely worth your time. We have other journeys that spend time in the Amazon jungle and, through that region to learn about the fauna and flora in a very different landscape in Peru. And then we also have itineraries that run kind of down the west coast and then overland through Arequipe and Colca Canyon. So there's a variety of different tours through the region, but I always recommend, more is more in Peru. And there's going to be a lot to take up your attention while you're there for sure.
We do have one question in the chat, was about, given everything going on, do you think we will have to wear masks? So I would say likely masks will be a thing in September of this year. I mean, when you're outside and can socially distance, those masks can be removed. However, I'm sure that there will be portions of the tour, given everything in Canada here and with the vaccine rollout in Peru as well, that masks will be mandatory for certain aspects.
Yeah, and there was a question here as well from Nicole. I visited Peru 10 years ago with G. He did the Lares trek. I did the Lares trek as well. Fantastic hike and really enjoyed it. Can you tell me if you know how the tours have changed at all in the last few years? I'd love to go back. I booked late, and that was why the Lares trek was available. How much time in advance would I need to book in order to make sure I could hike the Inca Trail? I have always recommended that you book a year in advance. So I think that's going to be, as prevalent as ever. Historically, the Ministry of Tourism have put Inca Trail permits on sale as of January 1st of the year. So if you wanted to hike the Inca Trail in 2022, then I'd recommend booking prior to that date. But then they shifted it and they brought it back earlier in the year. So the last few years, they've actually been releasing permits as of October. So October of the previous year. So if you want to make doubly sure, then if you're booking prior to October of 2021 for travel through 2022, it means that as soon as those permits become available and released by the Ministry of Tourism, we can go ahead and start pairing passport numbers and people with the permits for the dates that you would like. And that gives us the best possible opportunity of ensuring that you have the chance to hike the Inca Trail. For the one-day permits, there are also a limited number of permits available. And so again, book early to avoid disappointment to ensure we're able to get you the one-day permits. For the Lares trek, for other trekking options in the region, then we don't require permits. But with the Inca Trail, it's perennially popular. And so, even with, the current global pandemic, I would still say that booking early to avoid disappointment is always the right option.
Thank you, Gary. I think that's all the questions in the chat, but if you will hang out here for a couple minutes, if you do have any questions, you can pop them into the chat or unmute your line and ask them to us as well.
I'm also going to put both Aaron and myself in my email in the chat as well. So if anybody has any specific questions about our tour or wants to join and isn't sure, we'd be happy to chat with you as well. So if you wanted to even set up a phone call and just talk about this a little more one-on-one, we're more than happy to do that as well. So just reach out to us.
Perfect. Well, I don't think there's any more questions coming in. As Eric mentioned, you can reach out to us at any time. We've both been, so we are familiar with the area and what the tour involves. But I just want to thank everyone again for taking the time out of this beautiful afternoon to join us to learn a little bit more about our Peru tour. And we hope that a few of you will be joining us and ultimately see you in Peru.
Great. Thanks, everybody, so much. Thanks, Aaron. And thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Gary.
Bye, everybody.